Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mylon Thompson-Bukovic. I'm the Product Unit Manager for IIS. How many people in the room went to the keynote? Scott Guthrie's keynote. Everybody went to the keynote. That's great. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about what Bill, I should say, demoed in the keynote, which was basically the web app gallery and the experience for getting an application in the web app gallery. How many people in the room have ever used an open source application? Okay. So one of the things that we've done that's truly, I think, innovative and unique in, at least in my memory for the web platform for IIS, is that we've created a way to have open source developers all across the internet be able to add a few pieces of integration to their existing applications and have that application be able to be distributed to millions and millions of Windows users. So what I'm going to talk about today is two things. One, how can application developers go ahead and add that web application gallery integration using the tools that the IIS team produces? And then two, how do developers take applications that they get from the Windows web application gallery and use that to start customizing and making the changes that they want to with the web platform that you also get from the web platform installer and push that up to a website, again, hosted on IIS using IIS tools and platform. So those two different vantage points, one from the developer who wants to get their application into the web application gallery, and two, how can they use the web platform and IIS to change the application and push it out to a web server. Those are the two main points that I'm going to cover today and hopefully share with you. So let's start off with the Windows web application gallery. So for those of you who have seen this, how many people in the room have tried it out already? All right, got a few people who have. That's great to see. So this is a new destination that we have on Microsoft.com. If you go up to the web gallery, you can just start with Microsoft.com web WAC gallery. And what it does is it lists for you all these different applications that are available for install today. Now, we went and contacted each of these applications because we launched today, and we wanted to go find some partners to show you at the point of launch. When we talked to them, we talked to them about a couple of principles that we have. And basically, the principles, which are available for anybody to take a look at up on IIS.net, are pretty simple. There's a few things that you have to do to be part of the web application gallery. You have to point on a public URL to a zip package that is available for anybody else to download. And our idea there is that we're really trying to engage with communities that have support forums and are actively supporting their users and are building applications that can be reused for next generation websites. So the thing that we're asking people to do is have one version that's the most current version and have that be hosted on a publicly available website. So this is actually a bit of a different model that we're going with here, because in some cases, people who do a similar sort of thing take a snapshot of the community application. We're not doing that. We're actually saying, hey, we'll just use what you have on your community website, just add a little bit of integration points for us to work with, and we can go ahead and use that. The other thing that we're talking about doing is providing people to have applications that are free of charge in the web application gallery, but you are able to upsell to premium support and services. So while we're not taking payment for applications in the web application gallery today, what we do allow people to do is advertise in their application a way to get premium support. So Acquia Drupal, which is one of our partners, has a model where if somebody wants to get a subscription key, they can get paid premium support, but they should have free best effort support available on the website. The other thing that we require our partners to do is to make sure that they're compatible. And by compatible, I mean that their application can be installed in Web Platform Installer on all the platforms that Web Platform Installer supports, which is Windows XP, Windows Server 2003, Vista, and Windows Server 2008 and later. So the main piece of work that our partners have to actually do to be in part of the web application gallery is they have to do web platform or web deployment tool integration. So how many folks in the room have heard of web deployment tool? Okay, a fair number. It's a pretty important technology piece in the IIS stack. And what it does is it provides a set of services both to server administrators for migrating machines, but it also makes it really easy to take applications and deploy them from one IIS machine to another IIS machine. So what we're asking community application developers to do is to take this platform technology that we have, the web deployment tool technology, and build some integration points with it, because that's what IIS uses to unpack the application package on the Windows box and make sure it's working well. That's a really critical element. The majority of work that we found our developers that we worked with for the open source communities for launch had to do was the manifest work that I'll spend a lot of time on today walking through. This concept of support is really important too. So when we went and we talked to WordPress, for example, WordPress was really clear. They want to make sure that they have a good touch with their customers, and they want to make sure that they're able to help their customers with problems that they have. So we said, that's very understandable. Let's put a principle in there that says, in order for you to be in the web application gallery, you have to have a place for users to go to get answers to questions that they have. And forums seem to be the most common way of doing that. The other thing that we talk about, and this applies more to the ASP.NET applications, is to be hostable, to be able to work in a shared environment as well as a dedicated environment. And that's something we hear a lot from customers as being an important thing to do. So in terms of being inclusive, we ended up going kind of optional with this principle here. We have a button. If you go to the Gallery 2 website, you'll see the button there. And it's basically a download web platform installer button that is hosted on the application community site, where they can click it, and that web PI will launch with their application already selected. So that's an optional thing. Some communities are doing it, some communities aren't. We're going to leave it up to you as a developer. And then the final thing is to be safe. So we just need the communities that we work with to do all of the checks and the best practices to make sure that they're not redistributing other people's code, other people's trademarked information, viruses, etc. And we'll do a best effort check on our end, obviously, because we're sending this out to Windows customers everywhere. But we're really looking to the communities to do that as well. One of the things that we found through this process is that a lot of time application developers don't necessarily know if they are following with the best practices. So what we've asked them to do is take a look at what we've put up on IIS.net for best practices that talk about best practices not just for ASP.NET applications, but also for PHP applications. So let me go back one into the hosting applications area, and you'll see two sections. We've actually really built up this running PHP applications on IIS section. How many people in the audience work with PHP? Okay, we got a few people in here. We've actually, in the course of working with our partners for the launch, we found a bunch of different things that partners were inadvertently doing that we were able to provide some guidance on. So for example, one of the things that we found is that when some partners were trying to protect access to files by setting up regex rules in htaccess, on IIS we don't look at htaccess, we look at web.config. So we were able to work with WordPress and a couple of these other applications to make sure that they could add similar rules to web.config to have that same level of protection. So if you think about those principles that we've put together, these are the main criteria by which we review a submission to the web application gallery, and we decide if that application gets in. So let's go ahead and hop back here. As you can see, we have 10 of these applications today that are available. Some are PHP, some are ASP.NET. Some we worked with very close. I think we worked with all of them very closely, but some of them we actually had to spend a little bit more time trying to help with the making it run better on Windows part of it. And that, again, learning went back into the best practices guidance. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So if you go to the website, let's see, let's head out to the web gallery. And you can browse by different tactics. You can go into highest rated. You can do it by category. I'm just going to go in here. And you can see that we have this information about the WordPress application. So again, the model that we have is that we go out to the application developer's website, and we look there for for the logo, for descriptions, for the actual application package itself, and we pull that down. Sorry, I have to hop over here. Okay, so this is the Microsoft.com gallery website. And here I've gone ahead and selected in the Feature Web Apps WordPress. And all of this content is coming from the WordPress site itself, including the publisher date and the date added. And I'm going to go ahead and include it in my install. And this right here is Web Platform Installer 2.0. In our 1.0, we shipped the ability to install the Microsoft Web Stack. So how many folks in the audience used 1.0? Got a few people who did. So 1.0 was all about the Web Stack. So if you're a developer and you want to get the Microsoft tools and the Microsoft tools and products onto your machine and stay current, you wanted to use the Web Platform Installer 1.0 to go ahead and do that. In 2.0, we've added an app focus. So what I'm walking through right now is the new app focus. How those two things come together is what I think of as the pull-through effect, which is when I install this application, it will install all the components that I need out of the web stack. So what it does the first time it loads for WebPI, it might take a little while. You'll see a progress bar going. It's actually scanning your entire machine and seeing what the environment is that it's trying to install an application into. So when you get to this screen, this is basically what the application does to say, hey, I've got, most of what you need, but in this case, I need to go get PHP. This is another addition that we did in this release where we are now downloading PHP 5.2.9-1, which is the latest released version of PHP, and I need it for WordPress. So I'm going to go ahead and accept. And right now what it's going to do is install all of the dependencies for WordPress, as well as WordPress itself. And the WordPress application that it's installing is coming down from the WordPress website, and it has the MS Deploy deployment tool integration already in it. We're going to take a look at what those manifest files look like for you. Now, if I didn't have, for example, URL rewriter, or if I didn't have the fast CGI component, which are both two very important components in the IIS platform for hosting PHP applications, then this set of install requirements would also include those. And that's what's really interesting about WebPI, is that whether it's a PHP application or an ASP.NET application, WebPI will handle the pull-through of the web platform elements that you need to get the applications up and running. I just wanted to share with you, so we launched yesterday with the Web Application Gallery, and we've already gotten just a flood of submissions coming in from different developers who are already starting to build these manifest files. So it's pretty exciting. The other thing that happened is some of our partners blogged about it, and it was kind of gratifying for us on the product team to see because, for example, Chris Kelly at Gallery 2 talked about how easy it was to put it together, and Scott Hanselman, who does DOSblog, blogged about the simplicity of the manifest files as well. Our goal was really to make this as easy as we could, and one of the things that we had to do is work with the existing communities out there who had zip packages, for example, instead of MSIs. Okay, so what you see here is basically what the parameters that the WordPress application specified as part of the install process. So WordPress, like many of applications out there, spent a huge amount of time working on their setup logic. And what we're trying to do is not get in between the setup logic that the application does and the actual machine. What we're doing is we're actually just taking parameters about the site itself and we're laying it down. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click Continue. WordPress here is just working with MySQL, so I'm going to create a new database with my super secure password. All of these parameters that you see, including the default values and the descriptions, actually come from the manifest file. So an application developer has the ability to, An application developer has the ability to control what appears on the screen for the user. Skipped one. Okay, so I think that's the last phrase. And it's going to go ahead and lay down WordPress now. So what you're going to see in the conclusion screen is it's going to tell you everything it installed out of the platform stack, so you know. and then it's going to go ahead and launch your WordPress application. So this is the first page of WordPress. So WordPress, most of the applications that we work with have you step through a small provisioning stage to get the application up and running, and this is WordPress. So let's talk about getting into the web application gallery. We looked at the web application gallery principles. The next thing that you have to do is actually submit your application package link to us. And the way that you do that is pretty simple. You go up to the web gallery itself, and if you look at the bottom, you'll see a link to developers right here. And right here is where you click to submit your web application. And before you do that, what we ask you to do is to actually have the package ready on a public URL. We've gotten some submissions in since yesterday that have basically a bunch of the metadata that we need, like the URL, information about the app and the publisher, but they don't actually have the package. So we actually need the application package URL to go ahead for us to validate and make sure that it's working right. So this is a form that you fill out, you send it to us, we get it, my team gets it on the other end, and we do an evaluation of it, and then we get back. We usually go back and forth with the developer. And then if the developer can meet those principles that we discussed, then we will go ahead and add them to the gallery. So the other thing that we do is once it is in the gallery, we're actually adding it to an Atom feed. And this is a really important concept, because if it's in an Atom feed, it's got multiple different points of integration or exposure. So to get into the Atom feed, the main thing that you have to have is this manifest file. And a manifest file is the only required web deployment tool file that you need. It's the only required one. It basically describes the application and what it is. It describes the database provisioning script that you need to run. All of the parameters are in parameters.xml. And the parameters are basically what I went through when I typed in the password information, for example, for setting up the WordPress application. And that can be as long and as short as your application needs. There's also an optional install.sql script that you'll see as I go through demos, and that's really about provisioning the database. Once those are added to the root of your zip package, then you have, and it works, that's the other part of it, then you have web deployment tool integration. So let's walk through what that looks like. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go out to the WordPress site. And by the WordPress site, I'm just talking about the org site, not the one that I've installed locally. And I'm going to download just the package of WordPress right here. I'm going to save it into a temp directory. So here's my, my WordPress file. This does not have web deployment integration in it yet. And there's 3 files that I'm going to go ahead and add to it. The first one is a SQL script that's pretty straightforward. It's just to provision the database for WordPress. The second one is manifest.xml. I'm going to actually open this up in Visual Studio so you can see it a little bit better. And as you can tell, it's a pretty straightforward file. So what we have here is the parameters that say run the SQL script for provisioning. Tell me what the ACLs are for the root directory that I'm going to go ahead and set things up in, and what's the app path of the application that I'm going to install. So pretty straightforward stuff. Parameters.xml tends to be a little bit more involved because these are the parameters that are going to be displaying in the actual experience for the user for setting things up through WebPI. So again, all of these values can be determined by the application developer, and the way that we give them some tools to do this is that we have some content up on IIS.net. So if you go to the Microsoft Web Platform section for IIS.net, which is loading very slowly today, you can go into the Web Application Gallery section, which is new, and we have a packaging guide. And the application packaging guide is basically a walkthrough with a lot of code samples for how to set up default document, and if you want to do URL rewriting, and the actual creating of the package itself. So manifest.xml, as well as the more involved parameters.xml file creation. So we have tools available in guidance, and we're going to keep on adding to this. But this is basically what our partners use to create all of the web deployment integration that we provided as part of this launch. So let's go back to temp. And what we're going to do is we're going to throw these guys into the file. Hang on. Let's see if I am. Yep, I just added them in there. And now what I'm going to do, actually I'm going to hop back in here just for a moment. So once the actual file is in, once the actual web deployment integration is in the package, and we can accept it into the web app gallery, it goes into the Atom feed. And the Atom feed is a really interesting component for us because it allows for the applications to be surfaced in different distribution points. So one distribution point that you're seeing right now is Web Platform Installer 2.0. Another one is Microsoft Web Application Gallery. So the Web Application Gallery actually consumes the Atom feed. So it's the place where it takes the information, but it's also all the applications that you see there are also in the Atom feed. The other thing that consumes the Atom feed is IIS Manager. So I will show you that within IIS Manager, you can create a website or you can install an application from the application gallery from directly in your IIS Manager interface. And then finally, the Atom feed is also consumed by participating hoster panels. If you're wondering, that's where the cPanel image was supposed to go. So we actually have .NET panel and cPanel, both of whom are working right now on integrating the Atom feed with their hosting control panels. So users can go to a hosting control panel in a shared hosting setting and be able to lay down their particular applications. I also heard over lunch that Chris from Maximum ASP is also working on laying down WebPI on every single one of their virtual dedicated builds so they can create this app experience for all of their customers as well. So hosting partners, hosting control panels, WebPI users for the tool, and those users are really replicating very fast because we are putting WebPI as the way to get the Express downloads and other types of free web stack downloads, Web App Gallery, and IIS 7. All those distribution points come from that one Atom feed. So now let's go through that experience now that I've put together that WordPress package and install it into IIS. So here's the IIS Manager. And how many of you folks in the audience, if you could just raise your hand if you're using IIS 7? Okay, so most of you guys are already familiar with the interface. How many of you folks use the web extensions that IIS 7 has provided after launch? Just a few. Okay, so just a heads up, this is the new user interface for the management console for IIS 7. And we rebuilt IIS 7 and its extensibility APIs in the Windows Server 2008 release. And what you see is actually each one of these features is either shipped in box, we call them in box because it's shipped with the operating system, or it's shipped as an out-of-band web download. So a significant portion of our team right now is focused on these web downloads. It's a major initiative for us to do. And Thomas Demmel in his talk at 5 o'clock tomorrow is going to go over some of the deeper pieces of functionality that are enabled by the web extensions. But URL rewrite is a web extension here. I have a configuration editor, bitrate throttling, web playlists. These are all different web extensions, and you can't really tell because the way that we've architected the IIS management console is that it just plugs in and is part of the overall server once it's downloaded. That's another one of the benefits of the web platform installer is that it lets you discover those web extensions and get them on the box as quick as you can. Now over here in the action pane, I'm on default website, I have a couple of different options. One is I can install application from gallery, which again goes directly to the web application gallery to go get applications. In this case, what I'm just going to do, I just want to import the application. So I'm going to go to ctemp, and I'm going to go pick up my file that I changed. And what you see here are the contents of the package. And this is Web Deployment Tool under the hood. And what it does is it says, okay, I found a web application in here. It looks like I have it's looking in the manifest.xml file. So everything you see on the screen is coming from manifest.xml. It's saying, I found an installed script to go provision the database. And then here's all of my ACL permissions that I'm setting on the content for WordPress. This page, like I said, was all about the parameters. So if you remember, the parameters that we set in, or we looked at for the parameters.xml file with all the default values come from here. So I'm just going to install this to localhost, setting up my super secret passwords. One of the things that we found is, as we worked with partners, it was very obvious when they had typos. So when they were testing it on their end, we found a pretty rapid response rate because it was right in the user experience when there was a typo in the XML file. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. You can look at details if you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and install that. I'm going to refresh. And I've got WordPress. And let me go ahead and browse to it, and then I have WordPress working in that way too. So what I just showed you in those two separate demos was, one, how do you install WordPress from Web Application Gallery through WebPI, and then two, if I got a WordPress application that didn't have the manifest files in it, what would the manifest files look like? How do I add them in? And then how can I just use IIS Manager directly to import that WordPress file? So now I'm going to take it from a different perspective, which is where you want to start from an application, and then you want to customize it, and then roll it out to a customer. So a lot of the customers that we talk to are actually, they develop websites for small businesses, right? So they start from WordPress, or they start from .NET Nuke, and then they customize it, and within a day they have a site up and running for a customer, a small business or a medium-sized business customer. So what I'm going to do now is really start from, what does it mean to get an app, an open source application, from Web App Gallery? What does it mean to change it a little bit, and then package it up again, and then deploy it to a remote web server and just have it running? And that is the sort of scenario that we see a lot of our customers wanting to do with the open source applications. It's not just sort of play around with it, but actually use it as part of their commercial business. That is the beauty of open source. So, first step is always going ahead and getting the applications from Web Platform Installer or Web App Gallery. Then you do your coding with customizations and changes, and this is where the Web Platform Installer comes in really handy. So the releases, how many people are going to the MVC talk? You want to raise a hand if you're going to the MVC talk? Okay, so for those of you who've been tracking MVC, that's a really exciting technology that's coming out of the ASP.NET team on Codeplex, and WebPI lets you keep up to date with all the latest releases for MVC. And it's very simple. We just go out to Codeplex and pull down the latest for you. But from a convenience perspective and staying up to date with the web stack, when you're in the second step of getting coding with customization and changes, this is a really important thing to have around. And then you do your packaging, your application for deployment. That is a very similar process to the one that we've already discussed. And then there's the final step, and the one that I could probably spend an entire session on. It's the hosting and management of applications on remote IIS servers. So let's go ahead and start off by getting Silver Stripe from the Web App Gallery. So how many folks, before I do that, how many folks out there have heard of Silver Stripe? Anybody heard? Okay. It is a up-and-coming community application. It is, I think, a pretty neat one. It's, they're a CMS. They're based out of New Zealand, and we worked with them pretty closely on integration. One of the things that we found when we work with Silver Stripe is that they dynamically generate URLs when they are doing installation. So we had actually worked with them to have them include support for URL rewriter, because they by default worked with mod rewrite on Apache, and they made a few changes to their code, and now they automatically work with URL rewriter. So we're actually going to demo a little bit of that integration today as well. This is also something that WordPress ran into. We opened a trouble ticket with WordPress, and we're able to help WordPress with that URL rewriter change, as well as Joomla. So it's really gratifying to us as a platform, because we are the web server platform, to provide not just the fast CGI support to run these types of applications, but also to provide the same type of functionality for rewriting that is also available on Apache, but it's just running on IIS as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go out and install Silver Stripe. And let me go through, let me switch over. Silver Stripe, by the way, if you're interested, is actually loading, or it's in the category of CMS. I'm just going to go here. Actually, let me just categories. And they are in the CMS category. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I always look for the acronym. Okay, so here's Silver Stripe. If you want to read more about it, again, all this information is coming directly from the website. And what I'm going to do is I actually went to, when I was in IIS Manager, I went and WebPI is actually one of the features in IIS Manager. So I am actually loading WebPI from within IIS Manager. It's just an extension. So you just click on the icon in the management or in the main pane, and you can load it up. We always do this what's next section or what's new section here because the web platform, so much of Scott Guthrie's world right now delivers out of band. And the reason why Scott Guthrie's world delivers out of band is because we deliver for the web. So we're constantly iterating. On my team, I think, Thomas, we have about 14 different feature teams going on right now that are all developing different web projects, and they're all releasing on different cycles. So what this lets us do is make sure that it's really easy for people to go ahead and download the latest versions of RIS extensions as well as other tools. So Silverlight 3 tools for Visual Studio, the beta released, I think, yesterday as well for how to build Silverlight applications in a add-on for Visual Web Developer Express as well as Visual Studio 2008 SP1. If you want to look at the full stack, you can go in here and just check it out. You have all the different tools that we have in our stack. On the database side, we have SQL. We don't install MySQL right now as part of WebPI. That might be something we add later, but it's not in there right now. And then on the frameworks and runtimes, we have PHP, which I've already installed as part of my WordPress installation, as well as ASP.NET MVC, and of course the .NET framework. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to go down, and now I'm going to go to Content Management, not CMS, and go get Silver Stripe. So Silver Stripe actually is going to just install the package itself, which will take a while because there's about 3,000 content files in it. But Silverlight, because, oh, it won't actually, because it took a very short time there. But Silver Stripe, WebPI knows that I have the PHP framework installed, and it also knows that I have UR Rewriter installed. So it just skipped all that and then just jumped down to laying down the application, which I'm going to go ahead and do. And this one also only uses MySQL, unfortunately, but we're going to go ahead and create the database. It's a pretty common set of optional parameters, actually. I mean, the first part of it, you'll notice, is very similar to what you saw for the WordPress experience as well, but application developers are, of course, able to change it. Sorry, I'm having password problems today. What's that? Oh, I think I did that last time too. Thanks. Aha, the confirm. Okay, let me just make sure I've got all my other passwords in there. And then it's going to go ahead and lay that down. And this is actually the point where it is going to take a little bit of time because, it's just proven me wrong at every point. Okay, it's going to be as fast as that. All right, so this is Silver Stripe. And Silver Stripe is just going to go ahead and launch. It was as easy as that. We could go ahead and start editing and customizing it, which is actually something I'm going to do in a minute. But if you noticed, it was a very quick and easy process. And what we find is that when people try to lay down applications, especially PHP applications on top of IIS, a lot of times they have to take all these manual steps and they can get frustrated and give up. The goal here is to how can we get the most popular applications out there, ASP.NET as well as PHP, how can we get them on the box as fast as possible, and how can IIS, the web server, help provide the tools to lay down that application easily. So let's talk a little bit about what else we're doing around applications in IIS. So IIS applications, I kind of look at them in two different categories. On one hand, we have server extensions, which when I talk about will sound very familiar to people in the room who've worked for a long time with IIS. And then I'm going to talk about what we think of as app extensions. And this is kind of new for IIS. We're a web server, right? Apps sit on top of us. But you know, we can do a lot to make it a lot easier for people, both developers as well as administrators, to integrate with the site and the app as well as the server settings. And that's what you see here. You see 4 of our extensions that really target that application or that site experience. So let's start off with URL rewrite. Once we shipped Windows Server 2008, the first thing we did was start working on URL rewrite. And the reason why we did that is that when we looked at all those community applications all across the internet, the #1 used component was mod rewrite. And we did not have mod rewrite. So a lot of our customers were having to do all types of URL rewriting if they're not using mod rewrite in their application itself. So we built mod rewrite, and I'll show you how this works in a little bit. This is a really interesting technology. It helps create SEO-friendly URLs. Thomas actually has a talk at 3 o'clock, I believe, today. Oh, pardon me, at 5 o'clock today that talks about, it's just a dedicated 20 minutes just doing demos of how to use URL rewrite for search engine-friendly URLs. So URL rewrite is again, one of those major foundation pieces for our IIS extension app story. It's also one that gets used by our other extensions. So our application request router, which is more of a server extension, bundles URL rewrite with it because it uses it to automatically reroute URLs across a server farm. The other thing that we're actually announcing at MIX today is the database manager for IIS. And the database manager is an RC, so the RTW version will come out in the summer. And what it does is it takes this philosophy that we have of making the management console for IIS a single-stop shop for management, and it extends it to the database. So it gives you a basic CRUD of database objects, all of the database objects. It gives you basic basic CRUD for all of those objects to manage from directly in the IIS-7 console. So this is pretty cool. This means that if you're an application developer and you're messing around with your URLs, you can actually stay in IIS Manager and change a view, right? You can connect via connection string and go and do whatever changes you want to do with your database, because the way that we see it is that it's all part of your web application. And if it's part of your web application, we're going to provide the console into managing it, just like we provide the console for managing ASP.NET settings. The other thing that's interesting about our database manager is that we have a provider model to let you work with different database types. So we will ship the SQL Server one. We are actually testing, but probably won't ship the MySQL one. We're going to go connect with the MySQL guys and see if they want to take it on and ship it themselves. We're actually testing with an Access and an XML database provider. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to speak to the web developers out there that work with different types of databases or database variants, and make sure that they can, again, manage their database from within IIS-7. Then there's the remote management story. So how many of you folks have downloaded Remote Manager? Okay, I got a few folks. There's 2 parts of this. One is Remote Manager, which is what you can download on your machine if you don't have IIS running there to connect to a remote IIS management or a remote IIS server to manage it. The other thing that you can do is you can actually do what I'm going to do later, which is use IIS Manager to connect to another remote IIS manager or IIS server. And the goal there is that we know that developers don't typically work developing on the box that they're going to deploy to. They work in a development environment, and then they stage it to a staging environment sometimes, or they go directly into a production or a live server. And what we need to do is we provide the ability for the developer to send those bits up through, or to connect to a remote server securely over HTTPS and manage that server. And then finally, this web deployment, we call it web deploy internally, so I'm sorry if you go to our blogs, we kind of go back and forth on this. But it's officially web deployment tool. We call it web deploy or MS deploy sometime. But I'm just going to call it web deploy here. And again, web deploy is the platform for packaging applications for IIS. So if you're an enterprise developer, we worked really closely with the Visual Studio team. We're shipping in VS 10 with web deploy. And what you can do with Visual Studio or Visual Web Developer is you can, in Visual Studio, you can deploy an application directly from your authoring tool up to an IIS server with that web deploy integration. Okay, that's a really powerful thing, especially in, when you're trying to move your application between a staging environment and a production environment. In this case, what we've done is we've also demonstrated how you can develop these XML files, these manifest files, to use for the packing and unpacking of a package, a zip package, as part of our web deployment, our web application gallery integration. So these 4 app extensions are part of a new direction that the IIS team is taking, where we're starting to look at what the app does, what the app developer does, and say, hey, how can we be better at that? How can we make your guys' life easier in those areas? And we've identified a few ones. You know, if you can think of anything else, Thomas and I are both here. Happy to chat with you, or you can connect to us through either one of our blogs. But this is a direction that we're going to take more, we're going to continue to take with the product. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to that scenario I talked about, where what if you want to get an application and you want to customize it or change it, and then you want to export it to a remote website. Okay, so let's talk about how you do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, if you guys remember actually, I went and installed Silverstripe. Okay, so you guys remember me installing Silverstripe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the admin console, and I'm going to just add a blog. So here's the Silverstripe user interface. It's a basic CMS system. I'm going to say IIS at MIX. And then I think what I want to do is I want to make a somewhat nice looking image before I do that actually. So I'm going to go to the upload folder, and right now there's only one image in there. So I am going to, I need to upload a folder, or I need to upload a file. So I'm going to upload an image that I have on my desktop. This is all just to make my blog look pretty. I can't say there's any other reason for it. So let's try that again. Okay, maybe my blog won't look pretty. Okay. Back I go to site content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, just write a blog. To MIX, we are happy to bring the web application gallery and all our IIS web tools to you. Okay, I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to publish that. So then, if I can just go back to localhost Silverstripe. Okay, so here's my blog here. That's not much of a change, but given that I had a bunch of demos today, I'm trying to do this within time. Now what I'm going to do is I need to package this up, and I need to push this to a remote server. So now what I'm going to do now is I actually have to serialize the MySQL database. And the serialization that I'm going through is not actually something you're going to have to do once Web Deployment Tool RTWs. This is just a step that I have to do right now just because the functionality isn't quite there. But basically what I'm doing, Thomas, what was the password on this? Okay. What's that? Super secure password. Oh, it's my super secure password. Can anyone guess what my super secure password is? Oh, you guys are good. You guys are good. Okay, So basically what this is doing is it's just serialized the database into a file that I can use to pack into my application. And how do I go ahead? Okay, so right now what I did is I dirtied the package application, or the application package, right? I took my Silver Stripe application that I pulled down from the website, nice and clean. I changed it. I added a blog. I could add other things. I could add, components and other things to it. But right now what I'm trying to do is go ahead and package up my now customized application and export it to a different server. So what I do is I go into default websites. I'm going to refresh here so I can see Silver Stripe. And I go to this manage package area. And I'm going to hit export. So before, if you remember, what I hit was import. When I had the WordPress demo, I added those XML files, those manifest files, and then I imported with the manifest files into IIS Manager, which then recognized the manifest files to lay down the application. Now what I'm going to do is the other way. I'm going to take the files that I have, which already have the manifest files in it, but are changed, and I'm going to export it. Okay, so this is the export interface where it sees the file system content, sees that I'm trying to create an application. What I can do at this point is, because I've taken that extra step, which is only because we're still working with an RC and not an RTW of Web Deployment Tool, I have to go ahead and use our provider model to say, hey, hey provider, here's my particular serialized script. You need to unpack this on the other end for the web server. So if you look at this list, these are all the providers that we have for IIS, the web deployment tool. And I'm going to go ahead and find the MySQL one. And my path is ctemp, I think it's IIS at mix.database. Sounds good. And I'm not going to add any more parameters to that. And I'm going to put it in ctemp. I think I'm just going to call it Silver Stripe at mix. There's another package file in there, if you remember, from the last demo. And it's just going to go ahead and basically change the package. And the web deployment tool will, which is very fast, will, it's packing it up so that it can be unpacked on the other end. So let's just hop back here for 2 seconds. And let's talk about what's sitting on the other end. So the next step in my demo is where I'm going to connect to the remote server, and I'm actually going to unpack that package onto the remote server and show you how it works live. For folks who have laptops in the room, you too can hit my fancy new blog that I posted there too. So let's talk a little bit about the IIS server extensions. So IIS is a server, always been a server, always will be a server. So when we build web extensions, a lot of it has to do with either the management of the server and its contents, or the request handling of application requests that come into the server. So in the last year and a half, we've been investing a lot in our publishing stack. So we have a brand new IIS 7 WebDAV and FTP, and those are revised from the Windows Server 2008 timeframe, where now our WebDAV has full support for locking, and FTP has published extensibility interfaces. For those of you who are server administrators or work with people who are server administrators, this is our new recommended publishing stack, because it's standards compliant and it's secure. Okay? So if you're still running the old FTP service, highly recommend this on IIS 7. The other thing that we're doing is we're building up our management story. So we have an admin pack, and there's a couple of different categories of stuff in the admin pack. One is a configuration editor. Configuration editor is something that Thomas is going to go over in some depth tomorrow, and it's basically the ability to visually manage your configuration system in IIS Manager. The other thing that it does, and I have to say we use this an awful lot, is that it automatically generates scripts for managing the config system. So if you ever need a script for a demo, it's the place to go. You can just type in something, and you can generate a script in VB or a host of other different scripting languages that you can just take and reuse for daily tasks. The admin pack also ships the user interface or the management experience in IIS Manager for fast CGI settings and request filtering, ASP.NET authorization, and custom errors. Some of the stuff that went out in Windows Server 2008, but without user interface. We also ship Media Services 3.0. Who saw the streaming demos? The Silverlight streaming demos? Okay, so that is all built on IIS. It is a major strategic direction for us to treat web and media like content. So we are actually engaging, a part of our team goes and engages every day with the CDNs to make sure we can deliver live streaming and adaptive streaming in a really great way from the server to Silverlight and other clients. Application request routing is our HTTP load balancer. It's another really foundational piece of technology that we have. At MIX, we announced the ability to take that application request router and use it to turn IIS into an edge server. So we have disk-based caching, edge caching, and we also have support for hierarchical caches. So that knowledge of the hierarchical cache is something that we built specifically for CDNs like Akamai to use IIS on the edge as a sort of a squid compete scenario for us. So application request routing is another major component. Again, all shipped on the web, fully supported by Microsoft for the lifetime of the web server, et cetera. Dynamic IP restrictions, we have a beta from. All of these, by the way, you can go to WebPI and get. So if you see laundry lists like we put up of all the different stuff that we ship, WebPI is your interface into getting all of these things and being able to find out more and actually install from a single point of entry. So dynamic IP restrictions, we shipped a beta of it, but it's a pretty neat thing. It's basically a tool that server administrators can use to protect applications from denial of service attacks. It only works in HTTP right now. We got a ton of feedback from customers after our beta to make it work on FTP as well, because they see a lot of that type of attack happen over the FTP protocol. So we're working on that. And then web deploy. So I talked about web deployment for web application developers. Web deploy is crucial for the administrator as well. Web deploy is what you use to migrate servers, to synchronize and replicate servers across a web farm, and also to do basic backups of servers. So again, web deployment tool. It pops up in a couple different places, but it is a foundational piece across our different customer bases for IIS.
Question?
Yeah.
Is the old front page extension still available in IIS 7?
The question was, is the old front page extension still available in IIS 7? We have an extension for it that we shipped in February 28th, 2008. That was the launch date of Windows Server 2008. It is now being supported and managed by Ready to Run Software, who actually built the extension. So we don't support it and we don't build it, but there is an extension available for support with front page server extensions. It's not something we're going to continue to invest in. Our partner will, though. Okay. So, before my voice totally runs out, I wanted to show you guys this last part of the demo where I can take that customized package where I just created a new blog and push it up to a remote web server. So, what I have here is a remote connection to a Maximum ASP server, which Chris and his team were nice enough to give us access to for this talk. And what I'm going to do on the remote server, you can see it's stopped. So if you go right now to IIS at MIX, you won't see anything. It'll error out on you because we've stopped the website. But if you notice here, I have web deployment tool installed on my remote server as well. So when I install web deployment tool, I actually changed my user interface in that pane on the right side to include all of my application packaging options. So what I'm going to do now, and if you remember with the Silverstripe package that I created before, I imported. Now I'm going to export. I exported an application. Now I'm going to import that application. And the first thing I'm going to do is copy my connection string to my clipboard, actually, so I don't forget it. And then I'm going to set off the import. Now if you remember, I put this into the temp package, or the temp directory, Silverstripe at MIX. And then here are the different things that I am importing. If you remember, I'm importing the file system content and the Silverstripe application. And here's my serialized file. So again, in the next, when Web Deployment Tool RTWs, this will just be the MySQL database. Here I had to create a file because that piece of functionality isn't ready for release yet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the parameter for deploying the SQL database with the connection string itself. going to go ahead and unpack everything. Taking a little while. It's going across to a remote server. 3,000 pieces of content. Now watch it do it faster than I say it will. Has anyone in the room used WordPress as a blogging tool? Okay, so more people are familiar with WordPress. How about Drupal? Okay. What about Das Blog? Nobody? Okay. That's Scott Hanselman's blogging. It's a blog without a database. That's what it says in the blurb. Okay, so now I've got to start the website. Okay. And let's see if it works. And there's the app. There's the app with my customization, which in this case was a blog that is changed. But the app is live on the website. If you guys have laptops and you want to check it, it's up there anytime. I might throw an image in it later just because I really wanted to get that image to work. Oh, yes, except when Thomas needs it for his demo. But one thing that I did want to show to you while I was talking about Silverstripe is this capability that I mentioned earlier about the URL rewrite functionality. So when I installed Silverstripe, Silverstripe did the work to integrate with URL Rewriter. So we actually get a couple of rules right off the bat by default, a request blocking rule. So basically if somebody comes in and they aren't localhost and they're trying to look for an SS file, which is a admin-only file, then we will block it using URL Rewrite. It's one of the scenarios that URL Rewrite supports. It's almost a security scenario. The other thing that they have is an ability to do clean URLs by removing trailing stripes. One of the nice things to do with URL Rewriter, though, is that you can actually import an htaccess file. And I have to see if I can find one. Do we have an htaccess? Oh, yeah, it's a Silverstripe directory. Okay, so let me go to inetpub, www.root, Silverstripe. And here's the htaccess file. What our application partners do is they tend to ship a web.config file that gets ignored on Apache and an htaccess file that gets ignored on IIS. So a lot of times with a PHP app, we get both. And what you can do in IIS with URL Rewriter for Silverstripe is you can actually open up a htaccess file and import the rules. So how many of you folks have messed around a lot with regular expressions? Okay, how many of you folks like messing around with regular expressions? You are brave people. So regular expressions are really, they can be kind of fragile, right? If you know what you're doing and you're messing around with them, you can make them do almost anything under the sun, and if you make one small typo, you're busted. It's really hard to figure it out, too. So what we did here is we said, hey, you know, people invest a lot in htaccess rules. Let's just provide that ability to import it, we'll validate it, and then we'll just add it to our rules that we can understand and work with. So that's just one more app feature that we've built in. Okay, so here is my beautiful blog where I downloaded it from an open source site. I web deploy enabled it, which means that I am now ready to go in the web application gallery, and then I rolled it back up to a remote server where anybody can see the changes that I made to an open source application that made me look really good because I didn't actually do that much to make the application go. Okay, so I'm open up for questions. Thanks for your time. I have one question right up here. Can you come up to the microphone for me?
I'm just curious, how would the process be different if the back end was MS SQL?
What's that?
If the back end was MS SQL, how would the process be different from packaging those changes?
The package is, it's the same. So basically what we've done with this technology set is that we have a provider model where the experience is the same, and the provider for example, different types of databases, it's just all handled under the hood. So
We would already pull in the database automatically. We wouldn't have to export it.
oh yeah, that's, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, another question.
Could this be used for like WCF services, like packaging those up, deploying those?
Yeah, you know, it's a great point. We're actually working with the Dublin team right now. The WCF services team is called Dublin, their code name. And we're working with them for Visual Studio 10. They're actually using web deployment under the hood as well. So right now it's not ready, but it's in plan for VS10.
And how about support for like private app galleries? So let's say I've got like 30 services that I want to publish for IT staff to deploy and have them pull them down and install as machines, but I don't want to publish it to your...
That's a great question. So we get this question, you guys, I mean, if you can imagine, right, if we go up to a web app gallery, one of the first things that people say when they go up here is they say, how can I put, you know, SharePoint, or how can I put some other service, whether it's pay for or whatever, how can I include that and have it only display for certain types of people in certain environments? So like within the firewall, I get one set of things, and outside the firewall, I get another. These are all scenarios we're talking about. It's certainly not there for this particular beta, but the cool thing about what we've done around the architecture for WebPI and how this works is that we have these Atom feeds, and they all live outside the compiled bits. So WebPI and all these different distribution points just consume what we give them for the XML feed. So we have to figure out how we can put something in place in the XML on the server side to allow people to sort of slice and dice different applications and services based on rules like the ones you're talking about.
Or can I? Yeah, I was going to say, can I just create my own feed, and when you start WebPI, just point it at that feed, and then...
Yeah, we could...
Okay.
We can do that customization today, but the sort of the pay-per scenario, right, so like premium services and stuff, that's what we're looking at later, and we don't have that support. Yeah. But for example, if you wanted to, one of the things that the control panel hosters, or the control panel vendors are doing right now is that they only want to show certain apps, too. So they want to consume the app feed, but they only want to display a certain subset of those.
Okay. And then I assume there's the whole configuration system, I guess it's like metadata-driven. With XML, so you can design your configuration, and then WebPI displays it.
That's right.
Is that how it works? Okay.
That's right. It's all based on Web Deployment Tool, too.
On which?
So the Web Deployment Tool. So if you go to that website that I was showing you guys at the beginning with that application packaging guide, if you just follow those guidelines, then you have what we think of as web app gallery integration.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Hi.
Hello. When you deployed that site to that remote server, was that deployed as an XML file, or were like database changes actually propagated?
When you import it, if I had actually, well, I did actually make some database changes to it, because I think that the Silverstripe database was touched.
The content is from the database.
Yeah, it is.
So there was some sort of,
Goes into the database.
so there was some sort of a differentiation script that was
That's Web Deployment Tool. That's right.
Okay, so it's you. There isn't a way to upgrade. You simply overwrite whatever's there already. Okay.
And that's not a WebPI thing. It's not a Web App Gallery thing. That's a Web Deployment Tool thing. So what Web Deployment Tool has is these database providers that handle MySQL and SQL Server databases. And what they'll do is when they pack up the database on the import side and they take it over, they will note what all the different changes are. We do not have support for incremental updates of databases.
Okay.
Well, not yet, but nothing is preventing the SQL team or the SQL team to write a provider that supports it.
That's true. You can write your, and we have documentation for MS Deploy, for Web Deployment Tool to actually write providers. And once you write a provider, then it'll turn up in that drop-down list I showed, and it just plugs into the interface.
Okay.
For example, if we would change a file in the Silverstripe package and would upload it, it wouldn't be done like this because we would only change the file that we changed. So the file system provider already supports incremental sync. It's the database that doesn't. The MySQL doesn't.
Okay, I gotcha. So you did some demos with PHP being the backend. I'm curious, is Rails also an option, or is the technology different?
You know, Rails runs well on IIS. Have you been to the Rails site? Ruby on Rails actually has some walkthroughs that we worked with them so that, because Rails is FastCGI compliant, right? So it does run on top of FastCGI support. And if you go to the Ruby on Rails website, they have some walkthroughs around how to optimize for that. We've actually never tried packing up a Rails app, so I don't know if it works or not. It's not something we test. We really test PHP, and we test, of course, ASP.NET.
For WordPress, all the, I guess the benefit of WordPress is the community that builds all the plugins for them. All those plugins should just work out of the box on top of IIS.
That's right. So if you think about where Web Deploy sits, right? Web Deploy sits at the very front. Web Deploy sits at, hey, what is the application site itself that sits on the server? It does not get in between how does WordPress set up initially for its initial provisioning or any of the interaction, any of the app logic. That is wholly owned by the community application provider.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So what if you want to find a hosting provider that uses web deploys and the rest of your technology so that it's very easy for me to set up a website for someone who doesn't have one?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're working with them now. I think what we probably need to do is, on this website that you see here, have just a page for hosters that have the full integration in place. Right now, our relationships are with the hosting control panel vendors, and we're having conversations with a bunch of other hosters, but we don't have anything up and running quite yet. Another question?
Yes. Not URL forwarding. I'm not sure if URL forwarding is correct here, but let's say you have one machine. You were talking about the proxying a little bit, the routing or that edge methodology. Let's say you have one server that's sitting behind a firewall, and then you have another server that's in the DMZ, and the request comes into the DMZ one. Can that be forwarded to the server that's behind the firewall and translated that way? And is that a new feature that just has been off my radar, or is that a new thing with what you're talking about today?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the ARR?
Application request
Yeah.
is your IIS extension. Does exactly what you say.
Is it new, or has it been around a while?
It's one of the IIS extensions. RTW, so it released the web yesterday, but it's in beta and in testing for 1.5 years now.
Yeah.
We have sites in production.
Yeah.
Maximum ASP is setting up a server web farm right now, shared hosting on top of you can't talk to them. I think they already have it. That's at least what it's telling me.
It's basically a proxy, right?
Yeah, it's a forward proxy. So just to have a note on ARR, we actually released a 1.0 RTW version of it in January, I think. And the version that released here at MIX is the 2.0 beta. So the functionality that's being rolled out, like State Farm's using it, Maximum ASP, a bunch of different types of customers are using it in production right now. They're using the 1.0. The 2.0 beta is being tested by the content delivery networks that need that hierarchical caching that I talked about, as well as the disk bit caching and some of the edge functionality.
I see. Now, this might be out of the context of this talk,
Sure.
But with Azure services, should there be a way to make a request somewhere to the cloud and then have that be forwarded behind the firewall? So let's say you want to kind of simplify someone being able to host their application on their own home server, but you don't want to ask them to mess around with firewalls. Is it possible to get...
You want to look at the service bus stuff? I don't know if service bus is actually already publicly available, but that's exactly the scenario you're doing.
Yeah, you can register URLs in the bus and it'll forward those requests.
behind the firewall?
Well, they allow you to register URL in the cloud, send your request to the cloud, and then from your home server you will pick up the request, execute it, and send the response back to the cloud. This way,
And it would route it
you don't
then
have
to
to punch a hole in the firewall.
I see. So how does that work? I mean, what?
ARR is not important. They have their own.
They've got like a cute bus architecture and they hand the messages off to
Yeah.
URL specialists.
Our integration with Azure is that Azure uses our fast CGI component infrastructure to support PHP on Azure. That was part of the announcements that went out during this mix. They're using our fast CGI.
Thank you.
IIS7, sorry. Any more questions? Okay, so just to leave you on a getting started note, we have a bunch of different components that are new for Mix. You can just go and Look at IIS.net for any more follow-up information that you need, or just go directly to Web App Gallery, the developer site. The Web App Gallery is a major initiative for Microsoft. It is a place that developers can both start from and go to for their applications. WebPI is the place that we have, it's a centralized distribution point for the Microsoft Web Platform stack, as well as the apps in the Web App Gallery. And then the web deployment integration is all built to work well with the application packaging that the community developers are looking to do, which is just to take XML files and put them into existing zip files and be able to use that as the point of integration with IIS 7. So thanks very much for coming, and Thomas and I will be here for the next, I believe I have a few more minutes if you have other questions that you want to follow up with. Cool.